The desert world of Arkan stretched wide under two suns, a land of endless dunes and sharp rocky cliffs. The air shimmered with heat, and the winds carried fine grains of golden sand across the land. For centuries, travelers had crossed this world without knowing that something lay hidden deep beneath its surface. It was only when human explorers arrived with their scanners and tools that the secret finally revealed itself. Mara stood at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the excavation site below. She was young but carried the seriousness of someone who had spent her whole life studying forgotten civilizations. Her hands were dusty from digging, her hair tied back, and her eyes were locked on the half-buried stone door that the crew had uncovered. Symbols no one could read stretched across its surface. They glowed faintly in the sunlight as if they had waited thousands of years for someone to find them. Beside her stood Dylan, a tall man with rough hands and an engineer's patience. He had built half the machines that now hummed around the site. Drones hovered above, scanning every inch of the ruins. Workers moved carefully, brushing sand away with soft tools, afraid to damage the ancient surface. Dylan squinted at the stone door and let out a low whistle. "This is no normal tomb," he said. His voice was calm, but Mara could hear the excitement hiding in it. "Look at the seams. That door is not carved stone. It is a machine. You see the lines running into the rock? Something still powers it." Mara nodded. She had noticed the faint blue lines that ran like veins across the surface. They pulsed slowly, like the beat of a heart. She felt her chest tighten as she realized what it meant. This was not just a ruin. It was alive in some way. The locals had spoken of the tomb of the ancient queen, a place whispered about in legends. According to the stories, the queen had ruled this world long before any other race had traveled the stars. She had vanished, leaving behind treasures and secrets locked away where no one could reach them. Many alien scholars had come before, but none had found it. Some even claimed the tomb cursed those who tried to open it. But to Mara and Dylan, this was not a curse. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Mara," Dylan said, breaking her thoughts, "your ancestors had pyramids and hidden chambers on Earth. They left messages for the future. Maybe this queen did the same." She smiled slightly. "Yes, but no pyramid on Earth glowed with power after being buried for 10,000 years." The team gathered around as Mara gave her first orders. Lights were placed across the site, their beams cutting through the fading daylight as the twin suns lowered toward the horizon. The desert grew cooler, and the winds quieted, leaving only the hum of machines. Mara stepped forward, placing her hand on the surface of the ancient door. The stone felt smooth, far too smooth to be natural. Suddenly, the glowing symbols flared brighter at her touch. The ground trembled softly, and the workers stumbled back in alarm. Mara quickly pulled her hand away, but the glow remained, now stronger than before. Dylan stepped closer, his eyes wide. "It reacts to you," he whispered. "Maybe it was waiting for someone." Mara's heart raced. "Or maybe it just knows someone is here. We need to be careful." The team set up camp for the night, though none of them could rest easily. The glowing door lit up the site with a strange light, casting long shadows on the sand. The workers whispered among themselves, speaking of spirits and ancient rulers. Mara ignored their fears, but deep inside, she felt the same unease. When morning came, they began the real work. Dylan guided the drones, sending small machines into cracks and gaps around the door. Each drone sent back images of twisting tunnels beyond the sealed entrance. They showed walls covered in carvings and chambers lined with crystal-like structures. It was not just a tomb. It was an entire complex hidden underground. Mara studied the images with growing excitement. Every carving told a story. There were pictures of tall figures dressed in flowing robes, stars above their heads, and great ships crossing the sky. In one carving, a woman sat on a throne, her crown shaped like a rising sun. Mara had no doubt that this was the queen. What do you think she ruled over? Dylan asked quietly. Not just this world, Mara answered. Look at the stars in the carvings. She ruled across the skies. She was more than a queen. She was an empire by herself. The idea filled the crew with awe. If this queen had held such power, then what secrets did she leave behind? What knowledge slept within the chambers of her tomb? By afternoon, Dylan's scanners revealed the truth about the door. It was not locked in the normal sense. It responded to patterns of energy, waiting for the right touch to open. No alien scholar before had found the key. Perhaps they had lacked the right frequency, or perhaps the queen had designed it so only those with courage and persistence would continue. Dylan prepared his equipment, connecting wires and power cells. He adjusted the energy output of his tools, watching the glowing symbols on the door shift and change. The lines across the stone began to move, slowly forming a pattern. It is responding, he said, his voice filled with wonder. Mara stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the ancient machine. The door rumbled as if the desert itself were waking from sleep. Sand fell in streams from the cracks above, and the air grew heavy. The workers backed away, fear clear on their faces. The moment stretched long, the sound of grinding stone filling the air. Then, with a final shudder, the great door cracked open. A blast of cool air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of stone and time. Darkness yawned beyond, a passage leading into the unknown. Mara felt her heart leap. She had dreamed of discoveries like this her entire life, but now that the door stood open, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her. This was no ordinary ruin. This was a story written in stone, waiting to be read. She looked at Dylan, and he gave her a steady nod. Together, they stepped toward the entrance of the tomb, the others following behind with lights and cameras. The tomb of the ancient queen had waited untouched for thousands of years. Now, for the first time, humans would walk inside. And whatever secrets it held, they would face them together. The tomb's door stood open like the mouth of a giant beast, dark and silent. The air that escaped from within felt colder than the desert night, carrying the smell of stone that had not been touched for countless years. Mara stood at the entrance, her torchlight cutting into the blackness. Her heart beat fast, but her steps were steady. Behind her, Dylan checked the scanners once more before following. The workers hesitated at the threshold. Some whispered about curses, others about spirits of the queen that would punish intruders. But Mara reminded them firmly, this is history. This is knowledge. If the queen wanted her story to vanish, she would have destroyed it. Instead, she sealed it. That means she wanted someone to find it. Her words gave courage, and slowly the group moved forward. They carried lights, scanners, and tools. Drones hovered above them, shining beams into the corridor. The stone walls were smooth and high, carved with strange symbols that glowed faintly as if the light awakened them. Dylan walked at Mara's side. He ran his hands across the walls, his engineer's mind studying the hidden details. These stones are not just stone, he muttered. There is technology inside them. Energy lines run through every block, like wires under skin. Mara studied the carvings more closely. Each one seemed to tell a fragment of a story. She saw people raising their hands to the queen, stars falling from the sky, and ships shaped like wings soaring into space. The queen had ruled not only this planet but perhaps entire star systems. The corridor sloped downward, leading them deeper into the planet. The air grew cooler, and the silence pressed heavier. Every sound, the shuffle of boots, the hum of drones, even a cough echoed long after it was made. It felt less like they were walking into a tomb and more like they were stepping into the chest of something alive. After a long descent, they reached a wide chamber. The floor was made of black stone polished so perfectly that their lights reflected like mirrors. In the center of the chamber stood 4 massive pillars. Each pillar was carved with faces, some smiling, some crying, some screaming. Mara walked around one of them, running her fingers across the carvings. "These are trials," she said softly. "Stories of people who came before. The queen wanted to test those who entered." Dylan scanned the chamber. His device beeped loudly. "There are energy currents here, flowing through the floor and into the pillars. Something in this room is active. It feels like the chamber itself is watching us." The workers shifted nervously, their lights trembling in their hands. Mara forced her voice to stay calm. "If the queen left tests, then she also left a way forward. We need to find it." As if responding to her words, the pillars lit up one by one. The faces carved on them glowed with pale light. The ground vibrated, and a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, shadows gathered at the far end of the chamber, forming shapes that looked like people. The crew gasped as the shadows moved toward them. They were tall and thin, with glowing eyes and long arms that seemed to reach for the intruders. The workers stepped back, fear rising, but Mara held her ground. She raised her torch high. "They are not real," she said quickly. "Look at their steps. They make no sound. They are illusions." But illusions or not, the shadows advanced, circling the group. Dylan clenched his fists, ready to fight, but Mara shook her head. "If this is a test, then fighting will not help. The queen wanted to see if we would give in to fear." The shadows drew closer, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans. Mara took a deep breath and walked straight toward them. Her steps echoed on the stone floor, each one steady. The shadows reached out, their hands passing near her face, but she did not flinch. When she stepped through the circle, the shadows wavered, then dissolved into thin air. The pillars dimmed, and silence returned. A heavy grinding sound filled the chamber, and part of the wall slid open, revealing another passage leading deeper into the tomb. The workers stared in awe at Mara. Dylan gave her a proud smile. "You guessed right. Courage was the key." Mara tried to smile back, though her chest was still tight. "It was not courage," she said softly. "It was trust. We trust that the queen wanted to be remembered, not feared." They moved forward into the new passage. This corridor was narrower and more complex. The walls twisted, and the floor was uneven. Strange machines lined the ceiling, their shapes half mechanical, half organic. Some looked like watchers, their glass eyes following the group as they passed. Dylan stopped to examine one of them. "These are old, but they are still alive. They read us, measure us, decide if we are worthy to continue." He glanced at Mara. "This tomb is not a resting place. It is a machine, a whole system designed to test minds and hearts." The passage ended in another chamber, smaller than the first but no less strange. The walls were covered in glowing carvings, each showing battles and betrayals. In the center stood a stone bridge stretching over a deep pit. The bottom could not be seen, only darkness waiting below. The bridge looked fragile, thin as if it could break under a single step. Yet it was the only way forward. The crew hesitated. No one wanted to be the first to cross. Mara stepped forward again, her torchlight shining across the pit. She placed her foot on the bridge, and it held. Slowly, she walked, each step careful and steady. The bridge groaned but did not fall. Halfway across, the carvings on the walls came alive. They glowed brighter, and voices echoed in the chamber. Mara froze as she heard her own voice calling to her, promising power, promising glory. She looked to the side and saw visions of herself wearing a crown, leading armies, ruling planets. Her knees trembled. The vision was so strong, so tempting. She could almost feel the weight of the crown on her head. But she clenched her fists and shut her eyes. She whispered to herself, "I am not here for power. I am here for truth." When she opened her eyes, the vision was gone. The bridge grew solid beneath her feet, no longer shaking. She reached the other side safely. Dylan followed, his steps firm. The visions came for him too, but instead of crowns and armies, they showed him machines of great power, weapons and engines that could make humanity the rulers of the stars. He shook his head. No, he muttered. We do not need more weapons. We need answers. The visions faded, and he crossed safely. One by one, the others followed. Some stumbled, some hesitated, but all reached the other side. When the last worker stepped off the bridge, the carvings dimmed, and the pit below sealed shut with stone. Mara looked at Dylan. The queen wanted to see if we could resist temptation. She wanted to know if we would come for wisdom or for power. Dylan nodded. So far, we passed. But I think the deeper we go, the harder the tests will become. The group pressed on, leaving the chamber behind. Ahead of them stretched another dark passage, sloping deeper into the heart of the tomb. The air grew colder, and the walls glowed faintly as if guiding them. The first descent had ended, but the true journey had only begun. The passage grew narrower as Mara, Dylan, and the team moved deeper. Their torches cast long beams across the walls, which now curved in strange patterns. The air felt heavy, as if it carried weight that pressed on their shoulders. Every step echoed, and the silence behind the sound felt alive. Mara led the way, her hand brushing against the smooth walls. Strange carvings lined every surface. This time the images were darker than before. They showed armies clashing under burning skies, cities falling into flames, and figures kneeling before the queen with fear on their faces. Unlike the earlier carvings that had shown triumph, these were filled with struggle and betrayal. It is changing, Mara said softly. The first chambers showed her greatness. Now it shows what came after. Dylan studied the glowing lines that ran through the stone. Maybe the queen wanted us to know the truth. Not just glory, but the price of it. The corridor ended in a tall archway. Beyond it stretched a massive chamber so wide that their torches could not reach the far walls. The floor was smooth black stone, polished like glass. The air inside was cold and still. As they stepped in, the archway closed behind them with a grinding noise. The sound echoed long and deep until silence returned. The crew froze, staring at the sealed wall, but Mara stayed calm. This is how it is meant to be. The only way is forward. They moved cautiously into the chamber. As they walked, shadows began to stretch across the floor. At first, they thought it was from their lights, but then the shadows moved on their own. They rose from the ground, growing taller and darker, forming the shapes of people. One shadow stood before Mara. It had her form, her height, her stance. Its eyes glowed faintly like embers. Another shadow rose before Dylan, a copy of him, tall and broad-shouldered. Soon every member of the crew faced a shadow shaped exactly like themselves. The workers gasped in fear. One shouted, "They are us." Mara's copy stepped closer. It raised its hand, and a voice came out, clear and sharp. "Why are you here? Do you seek truth, or do you seek power?" The voice was Mara's own, but colder, harder. It cut into her chest like a blade. She stood frozen, her thoughts racing. Dylan's copy spoke too. "You want to prove that humans are greater than others. You want to take what is not yours." The shadows circled them, whispering in many voices, each whisper sounding like the person it mocked. The chamber filled with echoes. "You are weak. You are greedy. You are no better than the ones who betrayed the queen." The workers held their ears, some trembling on their knees. The voices sounded so real that they began to believe them. Mara forced herself to breathe slowly. She remembered the trials before. Fear had been tested, and temptation had been tested. This must be another test. She raised her head and looked directly into the glowing eyes of her shadow. "I am here to learn," she said firmly. "Not for power. Not for greed. I came to see the truth of the queen and her people. The shadow tilted its head, then stepped back. Its form flickered, but it did not vanish. Dylan faced his shadow next. It whispered about machines, about weapons, about the power to control. Dylan clenched his fists. I could take those things, yes. But they would destroy us in the end. Humanity does not need more destruction. We need wisdom. His shadow flickered as well, shrinking slightly. But not all the crew were so strong. One worker shouted at his shadow, "Get away from me," and ran toward the sealed archway. The shadow chased him, surrounding him, whispering louder and louder. He collapsed to the ground, covering his face. Mara rushed to him, kneeling by his side. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. They are only words. They cannot touch you unless you let them. Look at me. You are stronger than this." The worker trembled, then lifted his head. He stared at his shadow, which still whispered, but now he no longer believed the words. Slowly, the shadow faded into mist. Mara stood again, facing her own double. The queen wanted to know if we would fear our own darkness. If we would let it control us. But we are not our shadows. At her words, the chamber shook. The floor glowed with blue light, spreading outward like ripples of water. One by one, the shadows dissolved into smoke until nothing remained. The silence returned, but it felt lighter than before. The archway at the far end of the chamber slowly opened, revealing another passage. The crew breathed in relief, their shoulders loosening. Dylan looked at Mara, pride in his eyes. "You saw through it faster than any of us." Mara shook her head. "I was afraid too. But we all passed together. That is what matters." They stepped into the new passage, leaving the trail of shadows behind. The corridor ahead was lit faintly by crystals embedded in the walls. Their glow was soft and gentle, like starlight. After the darkness of the chamber, it felt almost welcoming. As they walked, Mara thought of the trial. The queen had faced betrayal in her life, she was sure of it. Perhaps the shadows were a memory of those who had turned against her. Perhaps she wanted others to understand that even the strongest rulers carried doubt inside them. Dylan spoke her thoughts aloud. She wanted to see if we could face ourselves. Not armies, not traps, but the voices inside. That was the hardest test of all. The workers nodded. They had felt their own fears and weaknesses laid bare. But now, walking through the glowing corridor, they felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from their hearts. After some time, the passage widened into a new chamber. This one was unlike the others. The walls were covered in shining crystals that reflected their lights 100 times over. The floor was smooth, and in the center stood a massive stone table. On it rested strange objects, tools shaped like stars, crystals humming with energy, and books made of thin metal sheets. Mara stepped closer, awe-filling her face. "This is no trap. This is a library." She touched one of the metal books. The surface lit up, and glowing words appeared in a language she did not know. Yet the symbols shifted, slowly rearranging until they formed words in her own tongue. She gasped as she read the first line. "These are the memories of the queen," she whispered. "Her story is written here." The workers gathered around, their fear replaced with wonder. Dylan leaned on the table, his eyes scanning the glowing texts. "So we passed the shadows. Now she rewards us with knowledge." Mara nodded. "But this is only the beginning. If she left memories here, then deeper inside, she may have left herself." The crew fell silent, the thought heavy in their minds. The queen was no longer just a legend carved in stone. She was becoming real, piece by piece, as they walked her path. And somewhere beyond the next door, she was waiting for them. The crystals in the new chamber glowed softly, their light filling every corner like starlight trapped inside stone. The room felt alive, humming with quiet energy that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the explorers' own hearts. The workers stood in awe, their eyes wide as they looked around at the shining walls and the great table of relics in the center. Mara placed her hand gently on one of the crystals. It pulsed under her touch, releasing a faint vibration through her arm. For a moment she thought she could hear voices, distant and layered, like whispers echoing across time. She pulled her hand back quickly, her chest rising and falling. Dylan noticed and stepped closer. "Did you feel something?" "Yes," Mara whispered. It was like hearing 1,000 voices all at once. She looked at the others. "These crystals are not just decorations. They hold memories." The team gathered carefully around the table. The strange books made of thin metal sheets still glowed, their symbols shifting until they became readable words. Mara leaned in to study them, her eyes scanning line after line. "The queen was more than a ruler," she said softly. "She was a guide. She brought her people together and led them across the stars." She turned one page slowly, her hand trembling. "But she also faced betrayal. Her allies grew jealous of her power. They tried to take it for themselves." The chamber seemed to respond to her words. The crystals on the walls glowed brighter, and the air shimmered like heat rising from sand. Suddenly, the light swirled into shapes, forming images in the air. The crew gasped as glowing figures walked among them, made of light and memory. They saw the queen herself, tall and graceful, wearing a crown shaped like the rising sun. Her eyes glowed with calm strength. Around her stood people of many kinds, different shapes and faces, all looking at her with respect. Then the image shifted, and the same people turned against her, raising weapons, their faces twisted with anger. The workers stepped back, some raising their hands in fear. Dylan held Mara's arm tightly, steadying her. "It is a story," Mara said. "The crystals are showing us her life." The light changed again, now showing ships burning in space, great cities collapsing, and the queen fleeing with her followers. She carried a crystal in her hand, the same kind that now surrounded them. She hid deep within the earth, sealing herself inside the tomb. The last image showed her laying down in a great sarcophagus, her crown beside her, as the walls closed around her. Then the light faded, leaving only the soft glow of the crystals. Silence filled the chamber once more. The team stood without speaking for a long moment. Each person felt the weight of the vision they had seen. Mara finally broke the silence. She was betrayed by those she trusted most. She wanted her story to survive, even if her body did not. Dylan nodded slowly. And she wanted to test those who came after her. To see if they could understand her pain and her wisdom. One of the workers, a young man named Tomasz, spoke up. His voice shook slightly. "But why humans? Why now? Thousands of years passed, and no one else opened this tomb. Why did it respond to us?" Mara looked around the chamber, at the glowing crystals and the relics on the table. She shook her head slowly. Maybe it was waiting. Maybe the queen believed that one day, another people would come who had faced the same struggles, the same betrayals, the same hopes. And maybe she believed they would be ready. The thought sent chills down everyone's spine. Dylan touched one of the crystals on the table. It glowed brighter, and for a moment he saw flashes in his mind, great machines, ships powered by stars, tools that could heal wounds instantly. He pulled his hand back quickly, his eyes wide. "There is technology inside these memories," he said. "Knowledge far beyond ours. If we could unlock it, humanity could leap forward by centuries." Mara frowned. "But that is also the danger. Knowledge can be used for good or for harm. That is why she left the trials. To see if we would use her legacy with care." The crew fell silent again. Each of them understood the weight of that choice. After some time, Mara noticed another opening at the far end of the chamber. A tall stone doorway stood there, carved with the queen's face. Her eyes seemed to watch them as they approached. Words glowed faintly above the archway. Mara stepped closer, reading them aloud. Beyond this door lies the heart of the queen. Only those who carry no shadow may enter. Dylan repeated the words quietly. Carry no shadow. She means no darkness in the heart. Mara nodded. The trial of shadows was a test of that. We faced our own darkness. Now we may continue. The door slid open slowly with a deep rumble, revealing a passage leading further down. Cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of stone and something faintly metallic. Before leaving, Mara turned back to the chamber of crystals. She felt as if the queen herself had spoken through them. She bowed her head slightly in respect. We have seen your pain, she whispered. We will carry it with us. Dylan placed his hand on her shoulder. And we will make sure it was not in vain. The team stepped into the new passage. This corridor was darker than the others. The walls glowed only faintly, and the floor was uneven, forcing them to move carefully. The air grew colder with every step, their breaths misting in the torchlight. They walked for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the earth. Finally, the corridor opened into another chamber. This one was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows. In the center stood a giant structure, shaped like a coffin of black stone, decorated with glowing lines that pulsed like veins. The crew froze. They knew what it was before Mara even spoke. The sarcophagus, she whispered. The resting place of the queen. The air inside the chamber was heavy, filled with quiet power. Every step they took echoed as if the queen herself was listening. The sarcophagus pulsed softly, as if it still held a beating heart. Mara approached slowly, her torchlight flickering across the polished surface. She placed her hand gently on the stone, feeling the faint vibration beneath her skin. Her eyes widened. She is not gone, Mara said in a hushed voice. She is still here. The crew looked at each other, unease and wonder mixing on their faces. Dylan stepped forward beside Mara, his voice low. Then the next trial will not be of stone or shadow. It will be her. The realization settled over them all. The queen was not only memory. She was waiting. And she would decide if humanity was worthy to receive her final gift. The sarcophagus stood in the center of the vast chamber, tall and silent. Its black surface pulsed with faint blue light, like the slow beat of a heart that refused to stop. The explorers surrounded it carefully, their footsteps echoing across the smooth stone floor. None of them spoke at first. The silence of the chamber felt too heavy, as if a single loud sound would awaken something that had been waiting for thousands of years. Mara stared at the glowing lines that ran across the sarcophagus. She had seen many tombs in her career, but never one that seemed alive. Her hand trembled slightly as she raised it, brushing her fingers against the smooth surface. The stone was cold, yet beneath it she felt a hum, like distant thunder. Dylan stepped beside her, his eyes sharp but calm. There is energy inside, he said softly. Something is active. This sarcophagus is not just a coffin. It is a machine. The workers behind them shifted nervously. One whispered, "Should we open it?" Another quickly replied, "What if she is still inside?" Fear passed among them like a ripple. Mara took a deep breath. We came this far to see the truth. If she is still here, we must face her. This is what she wanted. Dylan nodded, placing his tools on the ground. He connected scanners to the sarcophagus, reading the streams of energy running through it. Symbols appeared on his device, shifting in strange patterns. He frowned in concentration. It is not just storing her body. It is holding her mind. Her thoughts are inside. At those words, the crew gasped. To hold a person's mind after death was something far beyond human science. Mara's heart pounded in her chest. Could the queen truly still live, even after all this time? Before Dylan could adjust his tools further, the sarcophagus reacted. The glowing lines across its surface flared bright, filling the chamber with blinding light. The ground shook as if the earth itself trembled at the awakening. The crew staggered back, shielding their eyes. When the light faded, the sarcophagus opened with a deep hiss. The lid slid aside, revealing a figure inside. The queen lay there, her body preserved as if she had only just closed her eyes. Her skin was pale but unbroken, her robe still shining with faint golden patterns. A crown rested beside her head, shaped like the rising sun, glowing faintly with energy. Then her eyes opened. Gasps filled the chamber. The queen's eyes glowed with soft white light, not human, not alien, but something greater. She rose slowly, floating a little above the sarcophagus, her robes moving as if stirred by invisible wind. Her voice filled the chamber, echoing in every direction at once. It was calm, powerful, and heavy with age. At last, you come. The workers fell to their knees, some in fear, others in awe. Mara stood frozen, her mind racing. Dylan's jaw tightened, but he stayed steady, watching carefully. The queen's gaze passed over them all, her glowing eyes unreadable. Many have tried to reach me, she said. They came with greed in their hearts, seeking power, seeking treasure. None passed my trials. But you have come far. Mara found her voice, though it shook. We are humans, explorers from another world. We came not for treasure, but for knowledge. We wanted to understand who you were. The queen tilted her head slightly, as if studying Mara's soul. Knowledge is power. And power tempts. You speak of truth, yet truth itself can destroy if not carried with care. Dylan stepped forward, his voice firm. We know that. Humanity has made mistakes. We have fought, we have fallen, but we have also learned. We want to build, not to destroy. The queen's glowing eyes fixed on him. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then she raised her hand. Crystals in the walls flared, and visions filled the air. The humans saw Earth, their own home, shone in light as if the queen had reached across the stars to read their history. They saw battles of the past, empires rising and falling, wars fought, and lives lost. Then they saw people rebuilding, planting fields, raising families, creating art, and reaching for the stars. The queen's voice was soft now, almost thoughtful. I see in you what I saw in my own people. Hope and fear, greatness and weakness. I see the fire that builds and the fire that burns. Mara stepped closer, courage rising in her chest. We cannot promise perfection. But we can promise that we will carry wisdom. We can promise that we will not forget the pain of the past. The queen floated down until she stood on the stone floor. Her glowing eyes looked directly into Mara's. You speak with honesty. That is rare. She turned to the others. Tell me, what do you seek from me? The workers hesitated, unsure. Some looked at Dylan, others at Mara. Dylan finally answered, his voice steady. We seek guidance. Not weapons, not crowns. We want to learn how to build a future without falling to the same betrayals that destroyed your empire. The queen was silent again, as if weighing their words. Then she raised both her hands. Light flowed from her body, spreading across the chamber, filling every crystal and every stone. The air vibrated with power. You have come not with swords, but with questions, she said. You have faced your shadows and resisted temptation. You have passed the trials. Now I will test you one last time, not with fear or illusions, but with choice. The chamber shifted. The crystals glowed brighter, and in the air above the sarcophagus, two paths appeared as glowing visions. One vision showed mighty weapons, ships with blazing cannons, machines that could shatter planets. With them, humanity could rule the stars, feared and obeyed by all. The other vision showed peaceful cities, gardens under starlight, healing technologies, and knowledge that could cure hunger and sickness. With it, humanity could grow wiser, kinder, and stronger without war. The queen's voice filled the chamber. Choose. Take my power, or take my wisdom. You may not have both. The visions hung in the air, bright and tempting. The crew stared at them, their hearts torn. Some whispered of safety, of strength, of ruling the stars. Others whispered of peace, of growth, of building something lasting. Mara felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her chest. She turned to Dylan. His face was serious, his eyes locked on the vision of peaceful cities. He spoke quietly but firmly. If we take power, we will only repeat her story. If we take wisdom, maybe we can write a better one. Mara nodded slowly. She turned back to the queen, her voice steady. We choose wisdom. The queen studied them for a long moment. Then she lowered her hands, and the vision of weapons vanished. Only the vision of peaceful knowledge remained, glowing warmly until it sank into the walls and into the crystals. The chamber glowed brighter than ever. The queen's voice rang clear, strong, and filled with finality. Then you are worthy. The chamber still glowed with the soft light of the crystals. The vision of peaceful wisdom had faded into the stone walls, but its warmth lingered in the air. The queen stood tall before the explorers, her glowing eyes fixed on them with calm intensity. You have chosen, she said, her voice echoing across the vast chamber. But choice is only the beginning. Words are easy. Actions decide the future. You must prove that your hearts follow your voices. Mara's chest tightened. She knew this was not the end of the trial. The queen had tested them with illusions, with fear, and with temptation. Now she would test their truth. Dylan also understood. His jaw was firm, his eyes steady, waiting for what was to come. The queen raised her hands again. The ground shook, and the chamber began to shift. The floor beneath them moved apart like great stone plates, revealing deep glowing chasms. Bridges of light formed, narrow and unstable, stretching across the open space. The crew gasped in fear. Some staggered back from the edge. The glow below was endless, like a river of fire and stars, both beautiful and dangerous. The queen's voice was calm but commanding. To prove your choice, you must cross. Each step will show what lies inside your spirit. If your hearts are filled with greed, the bridges will break. If your minds are filled with fear, the light will vanish. Only those who carry truth will reach the other side. Silence fell. The challenge was clear. Mara stepped forward first. She placed one foot on the glowing bridge. It trembled slightly, but it held. She took another step, breathing slowly, keeping her eyes forward. The light beneath her feet grew brighter, as if it answered her calm spirit. Dylan followed, his steps firm and careful. Behind them, the workers hesitated. One man muttered, "This is madness. What if it falls?" But another whispered back, "We came this far. If we turn back now, we gain nothing." One by one, they began to follow. The bridges stretched far across the chamber, and the air grew colder as they moved forward. Every few steps, illusions rose from the glowing chasms below. Mara saw visions of gold and treasure, rising like hands offering her crowns and jewels. For a moment her heart jumped with temptation, but she closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "We did not come for wealth." She kept walking, and the illusions faded. Dylan saw visions of war machines, powerful ships carrying human banners, ruling the stars. For a moment his mind thought of safety and strength, but then he shook his head. That is not the future we need. His steps stayed steady, and the light beneath him grew stronger. Some of the workers struggled. One young man reached for the vision of gold, and the bridge beneath his feet began to flicker. He cried out in fear. Mara turned quickly, shouting, "Do not look at it. Look forward." Trust yourself. The man closed his eyes, forcing himself to ignore the illusions, and the bridge steadied again. Step by step, they moved forward together. When they finally reached the center of the chamber, the bridges merged into one. Here the trial changed. The queen appeared before them, standing upon the glowing path. She raised her hand, and the air shimmered with light. A new vision formed, but this one was not of gold or weapons. It was of Earth. Their home planet appeared above them, shining blue and green, but it was split into two futures. On one side, Earth grew bright, with cities in harmony with nature, families smiling under the sun, and ships flying peacefully among the stars. On the other side, Earth was broken, covered in smoke and fire, its oceans black and its people fighting for survival. The queen's voice filled the air. This is your true choice. I can give you knowledge to guide your path. But it will matter only if you remain faithful. Tell me, humans, which Earth will you create? The shining one, or the broken one? Mara's eyes filled with tears at the sight of Earth burning. She whispered, we cannot let that happen. We must carry wisdom home. We must build the brighter path. Dylan spoke with strength. We choose the future of peace. Even if it is hard, even if it takes generations, we will walk toward it. The queen studied them, her glowing eyes searching deep within their souls. For a long moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of the crystals. Then she lowered her hand, and the darker vision of Earth faded away. Only the bright, shining Earth remained, glowing warmly above them before fading back into the stars. You have spoken with truth, the queen said. But know this. My people also once spoke of peace. They also dreamed of light. Yet they fell into darkness, not by weakness of words, but by weakness of actions. If you are to carry my gift, you must carry it with discipline, with memory, and with unity. The bridge beneath them widened, becoming solid and steady. The crew stood together, their fear replaced by awe. The queen stepped closer, her glow softer now, almost gentle. You have chosen wisdom. Then wisdom you shall have. She reached out her hands, and the crystals in the chamber blazed with new light. Streams of energy flowed from the walls, weaving together into patterns that hung in the air like glowing books made of light. Symbols shifted and reformed, filling the chamber with knowledge beyond measure. The crew stared in wonder. They saw designs for healing machines, for farming systems that could feed millions, for energy sources that would never run dry. They saw maps of the stars, showing paths to other worlds, and lessons about balance, leadership, and peace. Mara's heart raced. This was not just treasure. This was hope. The queen's voice was calm but firm. This knowledge will not make your people perfect. But it will give them a chance. A chance to rise without destroying. A chance to build without falling. Dylan bowed his head with respect. We accept it. And we will protect it. The queen looked at him for a long moment, then at Mara, and then at the others. Remember, she said softly, every choice shapes the future. If ever you forget, this wisdom will turn to ash in your hands. Carry it well. The light slowly faded, leaving the chamber calm again. The glowing bridges dissolved, and the floor returned to solid stone. The crew stood silent, the weight of what they had seen heavy in their hearts. Mara looked around at her team. She saw fear, but also hope in their eyes. They had walked through trials, faced temptations, and seen the truth of what could be. Now they carried the gift of an ancient queen, and with it, the responsibility of 1,000 futures. Dylan turned to her, his voice low but steady. The choice is made. Now we must prove worthy of it. Mara nodded. She knew the queen was not finished with them yet. One last challenge still waited. But for now, they had chosen the path of wisdom, and the future of humanity glowed brighter than before. The chamber had grown calm after the brilliant light faded. The glowing crystals that had filled the room with knowledge dimmed, leaving a soft, steady illumination. Mara, Dylan, and the crew stood together, each feeling the weight of what they had witnessed. For a moment, it seemed that the Queen's trials were over. But then the air shifted. A faint hum filled the chamber, soft at first, then rising steadily until it became a clear, commanding presence. The Queen's voice echoed once more. Knowledge alone is not enough. The heart must also carry courage, compassion, and unity. Only then will wisdom last. Mara's chest tightened. She knew that this was the final trial. They had chosen wisely, resisted temptation, and embraced knowledge, but the Queen's final test would determine whether they could truly carry it into the world. The Queen floated forward, her robes moving as if stirred by invisible wind. Her glowing eyes scanned the explorers. To pass the last trial, you must act, not speak. You must show that your hearts are ready to protect, to sacrifice, and to lead without faltering. The floor beneath them began to shift. Panels of glowing stone rose from the ground, forming platforms suspended over deep shadows. The room seemed to stretch endlessly, the edges of the chamber lost in darkness. The platforms moved slowly, some rising, some falling, creating a shifting maze. Dylan swallowed hard. It is a test of balance, but not only physical. It is a test of trust, courage, and unity. The Queen spoke again. You must reach the center of the chamber. Only together can you succeed. If any falter, the trial will fail. Mara nodded and turned to the crew. Stay close. Watch each other. Every step matters. They began to move across the platforms. The stones were uneven, some tilting as they stepped on them. The hum of the chamber vibrated in their bones. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes of dangers past, collapsing cities, burning ships, fallen allies. The illusions were meant to shake them, to tempt them to fear or retreat. One worker faltered, staring at the shadow of a collapsing building that seemed ready to fall on him. Mara grabbed his arm firmly. Focus on us. We move together. Trust your steps and trust your heart. He nodded and followed, steadier this time. Each step tested not only balance but resolve. The platforms shifted faster, rising and falling unpredictably, and the shadows grew bolder. Mara's mind raced. She realized the trial was not only for the body but for the spirit. The Queen wanted to see if fear would break them when wisdom guided them. Dylan guided the group across a particularly unstable path, stepping on a platform that wobbled dangerously. Hold the line, he shouted. We are stronger as one. The crew tightened together, moving carefully. They encouraged each other, sharing words of support and reassurance. Every time a shadow tried to distract or frighten someone, another team member reminded them of their purpose. Slowly, steadily, they made their way toward the center. Finally, they reached a wide circular platform at the chamber's heart. The shadows dissolved, and the platform stabilized. The hum of the room became soft and warm, almost comforting. They looked around to see the Queen standing before them, her glow brighter than ever. You have proven your hearts, she said. You did not only choose wisdom, you carried it through action. You protected each other, resisted fear, and moved forward together. That is the quality of true guardians of knowledge. Mara bowed her head in respect. We are ready to carry your wisdom into the world, she said softly. The Queen floated closer, placing her hands above the glowing crystals that still hung in the air. Streams of light flowed from her palms, merging with the knowledge and energy in the room. The air shimmered, and the chamber seemed to breathe. Take what you have learned, she said. Share it, protect it, and remember that every choice shapes the future. If you falter, the light may fade, but if you remain true, it will guide your people for generations. Dylan stepped forward, his hand reaching for the streams of energy. As he touched the glowing light, he felt knowledge flow through him, designs for machines that healed, ideas for cities that lived in harmony with nature, ways to travel the stars without conquest or war. He looked at Mara, his eyes shining with awe. She touched the streams next. The energy entered her mind, filling it with visions of leadership, problem-solving, and compassion. She felt the weight of responsibility, but also hope, and she knew that the Queen had trusted them with the future. The workers followed, each receiving the knowledge in their own way. Some cried softly, overwhelmed by the responsibility. Others smiled, inspired by the possibilities. Together, they were transformed, not only in mind but in spirit. The Queen's voice softened, filled with warmth. You have passed the final trial. The tomb is now open to you as allies, not intruders. You may leave with my legacy, and it will guide your people wisely, if you honor it. The chamber pulsed once, then settled into calm. The glowing crystals dimmed to a gentle light, no longer threatening but comforting. The platform solidified, and the path back to the surface opened before them. Mara looked at Dylan and the team. We have what we came for. Now it is time to return and share it with the world. The Queen floated to the sarcophagus once more. Remember this place, she said. Remember what you learned. Carry wisdom, and let it shine even in darkness. Your journey is only beginning. Mara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We will not forget. We will carry it forward. With careful steps, the team retraced their path through the tomb. The trials were no longer a test, they were a memory of what they had overcome. The shadows and illusions did not return, for they had proven their hearts and minds were strong. When they finally reached the desert surface, the sun was rising over the horizon. Its warm light bathed the sands in gold, and for a moment, the harshness of the journey faded. The team looked at the tomb and trance one last time. The Queen's voice echoed softly, carried by the wind. Go now. Build wisely. Let humanity rise without fear, without greed, and without betrayal. Remember the lessons of the past, and the light of the future will guide you. Mara took a deep breath, feeling the weight and the hope of the gift they carried. Dylan stood beside her, holding the knowledge within him, ready to guide their people. The team was changed forever, bound not only by their journey but by the responsibility of what they now held. Together, they walked back toward their ship, the desert stretching endlessly before them. The tomb remained behind, untouched and sacred, guarding the secrets of the ancient queen. Yet her legacy now traveled with them, a beacon for the future. The sun rose higher, and the world seemed brighter. Mara looked at her companions, a quiet smile on her face. Humanity had faced the test of the ancient queen and it had passed. And in that moment, the possibilities of the future felt endless.